Hello, and welcome to the official CertCop's series. This is the Introduction to Red Team Level 1 course. This course is going to give you a good background into what it means to be a Red Team professional. You might hear it called Pen Tester, you might hear it called Red Teamer, but whatever you call it, this is going to be your introductory module to your foundational level course for that purpose, the offensive side of security. So, Introduction to Red Team. This is going to give you a good background. At least it'll give you an idea of where you are technologically with your own experiences for starting this course. So we're going to do a little bit of background on the company. We're going to talk about who this course is for. We'll talk about some of the different positions that this course can qualify you for. We'll talk about some of the different prerequisites, the course lab materials, as well as the schedule / topics that are going to be covered. The exam itself, and we'll give a brief introduction to Red Team methodology, which we'll be doing a full module on that in the oncoming or the forthcoming lessons. We'll talk about offensive cyber operations, as it is called by U.S. military. Let's talk about the company intro here. CertCop is a U.S.-based company. So this course is going to provide you with a bunch of information in regards to Red Team operations, Red Team topics. So CertCop is a cybersecurity training division of SecBay Incorporated. CertCop is actually what the certification is short for Certified CyberCop. So CertCop is a cybersecurity training division of SecBay, and the team members of CertCop have an average of 20 plus years experience in the industry, especially pioneering in many ways the knowledge transfer industry itself. And CertCop instructors understand the unique challenges that especially with veterans face coming back home from combat zones, understand what its difficulties in trying to translate military experience to corporate resumes. So CertCop is going to be a force multiplier for companies and is going to enable companies to be able to hire the best and brightest in the technology world. So welcome to the Certified CyberCop Red Team Level 1 course. So this series of certifications is designed to make students more aware of Red Team operations. This is just one of the many certifications that we have on the website, including FedRAMP, cloud certifications, Kali Linux pen testing. We have Linux courses, we have database courses, PostgreSQL, MySQL, we have FedRAMP, we have ITIL, we have risk management framework, and many others. So this is the brief. Typically, if we were doing a live class, students would introduce themselves, their background. So the key takeaway here is to remember what you're bringing to the table. If you can successfully identify your experience and be honest with your own skill set, and then come up with some goals for the course, what you actually want to achieve. Because if you don't have goals for the course, then you're just taking a course for the sake of taking the course. So you need to figure out, what areas are you lacking? Is it command line? Is it hands-on? Is it port numbers and protocols? Is it just theory and methodology? So your instructors will have a wealth of background. Majority have many certifications, including not just industry vendor neutral certifications like CompTIA, EC Council, but certifications in the respective areas they work in. So most of our instructors not only are certified, but they are also experienced in working in the actual industry as consultants, etc. So who is this course for? This course is designed to provide a wide variety of information, and whether you're an engineer, an IT manager, you can benefit from this course. There's different perspectives, and maybe will make this course beneficial for not just technical experts, but also business professionals, managers. So some of you may have questions. I won't be able to cover all of the possible questions, but try to answer throughout the course most of the questions you might have. So this course is going to make you more capable at being a system maintainer, an ethical hacker, or a red teamer if you're an offensive security person. Maybe you're a SOC analyst. Maybe you're on the other side, the defensive side. So any security professional, whether it's a information security officer or information and assurance manager, and of course threat hunters. So threat hunters looking to understand better how red team can increase their ability to defend. There's C&D specialists, computer network defense or exploitation teams, forensic specialists even. And then there's the cyber protection teams that are being tasked with the difficult job of protecting our critical infrastructure. And of course, auditors that need to build some technical skills to be able to understand how to measure success for their different organizations as well. So these are just some of the jobs that this course will prepare you for, whether it's a offensive, defensive, or even a C-level executive. So what are the prerequisites for this course? So this course is going to be as much hands-on as possible to make you effective for conducting red teaming operations. To get the most out of this class, you want to make sure that you have knowledge of the prerequisite topics listed here. This is not to say you can't still take the course, but I highly recommend that you check out some of our micro courses over on CertCop.com. We have a wide variety of courses that can help complement the learning process. We recommend that you have some OSI model, Open Systems Interconnection model, the TCP/IP model. Understand what IP version 4 versus IP version 6 is. Understand command line. Knowledge of port numbers and protocols. So basic networking. IP. What is an IP address? What is a subnet mask? What about a default gateway? Classful addressing versus classless addressing. You must at a minimum know TCP/IP stack and OSI model, networking knowledge, as well as port numbers. Because if you don't know port numbers, then you cannot understand what protocols, and all these things are going to prepare you for level 2. So having some kind of competency with the command line, whether it's a Windows terminal, whether it's Microsoft PowerShell or Linux. Linux powers 96% of the world's computing systems. Before that, it means that you're probably using Linux and don't even realize it. You have to understand some Linux commands, how to work with Linux accounts, files, working with Linux folders and folder structure. What is
Chris? I got disconnected.
You got to understand Linux commands. You have to understand working with Linux processes. We're going to talk about managing packages in Linux, how to install, uninstall packages, how to manage repositories. These are all tasks that will need to be something you won't have to know every single component, but the more knowledge you have coming in, the easier it will be for you to pick up the information along the way. Windows commands. What's a command prompt? What about ipconfig or ifconfig in Linux? What about ping and nslookup and some of the tools for Windows? Know the difference between a Linux machine and a Windows machine. One being case sensitive and so on. Of course, much knowledge about networks, protocols, and port numbers that you can bring to the table. So topics, we're going to start out with an introduction to the CertCop's series. We'll go over some basic cybersecurity fundamentals that should be prerequisite. And we move into red team methodologies and the advantages of red teams and disadvantages of red teams. We'll talk about human hackers versus tools. Talk about differences between penetration testing, red teaming. We'll cover what is a pen test, what all does it entail. And we'll talk about some of the different approaches to pen testing: black box, white box, gray box. We'll talk about the different types of penetration testing, whether it's uh, penetration testing network services. You may do some, or you may do all of these at different stages of your red team events. You may do very narrow penetration testing. You may only do the web applications. You may not necessarily go into the physical infrastructure, especially if you're in the cloud. You may deal with some client side testing, server side, so you're understanding how to bypass server side protection. Application pen testing. I say that 70% of all the new vulnerabilities are coming from the applications. Well, is that because developers are so much worse at writing applications these days, or is it just that security's not a primary focus? We're going to have a module on wireless. We're going to talk about wireless networking, things you need to understand versus traditional networking, how to connect to access points, what is an SSID, things like differences between different kinds of wireless routers versus wireless access points. Talk about things like site surveys and different important components for antenna versus power versus gain. Talk about social engineering, whether it's email based phishing attacks. We'll talk about phone based or phishing attacks, and of course, in person. You'll hear this time and time again. Social engineering is the art of people hacking. Basically, getting people to do what they otherwise ordinarily wouldn't want to do. We'll talk about physical penetration testing, going after a building, for example, or literally the locks on an exterior door of a building. Talk about different phases of penetration testing. We'll look at open source intelligence, reconnaissance, many of the tools that go into the reconnaissance phase. We'll look at footprinting, enumeration, figuring out what services are live, what systems are up and operational. And we'll talk about how to obtain a foothold, gaining access to a system and then pivoting, i.e., moving laterally to obtain more access. We'll talk about privilege escalation, exfiltrating data, covering your tracks, being stealthy as an attacker. So this is typically an on-site course would be a 5-day course, but the pace will be at the instructor's discretion. This will be a 40-hour course for level 1 and approximately 4 to 5 lectures per day. Pacing will be left up to the instructors, but the instructor will try to demonstrate as many tools as possible. There will not be time to demonstrate every single tool that will be in the curriculum. There's just too many tools out there, and we would be here for an entire semester. So these are some of the different red team actors. Some of these may be part-time jobs, some may be full-time jobs. You may not even have all this expertise on hand. Ethical hackers. There's actually many of you may have heard of EC Council CH certification. Penetration testers, so people that actually try and circumvent security to break in and take information. Application pen testers, so specifically charged with breaking particular applications. And then, of course, security professionals that are ones that are going to be tasked with securing the network, updating systems, doing patch management, conducting vulnerability scans. Then you have incident response and incident handlers. You may have different people doing the job. You may have only 1 or 2 people qualified on this. These are the few, not an all-inclusive list on everything that is part of the red team. So let's talk about some of the different color teams, the differences between red, the blue, and the purple team. So we have the red team, which their key focus is largely offensive. So we have red team is offensive, focused on things like penetration testing, ethical hacking, enumeration scans, wireless site surveys. Typically, these services may be outsourced to a third party or managed security provider or managed security service provider. The blue team is going to be largely defensive, talking cyber defense analysts, SOC analysts, being able to detect indicators of compromise. The blue team is defensive. They conduct vulnerability scans, making sure all the holes are patched in the network. So it could be a combination of internal personnel and also the MSP or MSSP. Now, the purple team is where things get a little bit interesting. So the purple team is not even necessarily have to be a separate team. Purple team actually are when the blue team and the red team start doing information sharing, problem solving, trying to coordinate with stakeholders to fix vulnerabilities found but during the red team engagement. Purple teams are generally neither offensive nor defensive, and the way they get created varies depending on whether or not the organization has a mature security process or not. Remember, red team, blue team, and purple team. Red's offensive, blue team is defensive, purple team is a mix. So let's look at the lab materials, what you will actually be doing. Much of the emphasis is going to be based upon labs, hands on activities to reinforce concepts in the course. There'll be numerous command line tools in Linux and also Windows tools that a red team member rather will need throughout the course of their security lifecycle. One of the skills you'll have to master if you're not already an expert at it is virtualization, hypervisors, VMware Player, Workstation, VirtualBox. You have to master one of the offensive Linux distributions like Kali, Linux, or Parrot. Understanding network tools like IP Scanner, Nmap, Wireshark. And then, of course, Linux tools. So we talked about Whois, ifconfig, traceroute, IP address, dig, grep, tail, and many more. We'll talk about Windows tools like NSLOOKUP, NBTstat or NetBIOStat. We'll talk about Snort versus Malwarebytes. We'll even get into some of the physical penetration tools like the bad USB attack. Which is why most of the military has largely gotten rid of all the portable thumb drives because of the bad USB attack, which essentially would go and take over a computer simply by plugging in a thumb drive. We got the USB rubber ducky, which is a little thumb drive device that lets you write scripts at seemingly superhuman speeds. We'll talk about some lockpicking tools. We'll look at social engineering. What kind of pretexts are acceptable? Voice solicitation, vishing, smishing, which is phishing by text message, and of course, impersonating. We'll look at some RFID hid prox cloning, like the ESP key or Proxmark. We'll talk about biometrics. We'll look at some of the different vulnerability scanning tools like Nessus, OpenVOS, Nikto, and Nmap. We'll look at anti-malware software like Malwarebytes and Spybot. That's what I happen to run on my system. We'll talk about behavioral versus signature-based detection. So let's talk about the exam. The exam is 100 questions for 3 hours. The mix of drag and drop questions, matching, and performance-based questions. By performance-based questions, we mean you got to perform some task related to the material. So we also have, as part of CertCop.com, all of the exam prep tools, the practice questions, and practice tests are there. You can look at the fees on the website. So let's do a little warm up exercise. A warm up exercise. Let's talk about, what does a hacker see? But keep in mind, the red team is doing this from the offensive perspective. What information can a hacker gain about my system? What's publicly available? What is my system advertising? Maybe I'm not aware of. How can a hacker exploit vulnerabilities to escalate privileges? What sensitive information is vulnerable in my network? Proprietary data, patents, trade secrets, anything that could potentially be damaging to a company. How could a hacker spread malware on my network? If they were given physical access, could they spread malware and take over systems? Maybe perform ransomware attacks? How does a hacker use security research? So, security research is valuable data, things like bugs and bug bounties, or maybe patches that are not installed properly. But hackers can use security research just like researchers can use it for offensive things. But what exactly is a red team? Well, according to NIST's definition, a red team is a group of people that is authorized and organized to emulate a potential adversary's attack or exploitation capabilities against an enterprise security posture. The red team's objective is to improve enterprise information assurance by demonstrating the impacts of successful attacks and demonstrating what works for the defenders, i.e., the blue team, in an operational environment. The group responsible for defending the enterprise's use of information systems by maintaining its security posture against the group of attackers, i.e., the red team, is the blue team. Blue team and its supporters must defend against real or simulated attacks over a significant period of time. The red team members need to make sure that they're performing their duties in an absolutely ethical manner and don't exceed the scope of the exercise. Let's talk about cyberspace operations. Cyberspace operations, or DoD cyberspace operations, are categorized into offensive cyber operations intended to protect power by the application of force in and throughout cyberspace. These operations are authorized in operations like physical domains. Defensive cyberspace operations, or DCO, are to defend the DoD or other friendly cyberspace resources. These can be both passive and active defense operations and are conducted inside and outside of the DoD information network. DoDIN, which is what DoD Information Network stands for, is operations to build, design, configure, secure, operate, maintain, and sustain DoD communications. So the DoD network must be maintained by blue team, red team, and even purple team. And now you've been given a good introduction to our company, what your type of instructors you'll see, the course itself. Who is this course for? We talked about prerequisites for the course and things that will be helpful to you throughout the course. We talked about course lab materials, the scheduling, the exam, as well as red team methodology and offensive cyber operations. That concludes this introductory module. I appreciate your attention. We'll see you in the next one. Welcome to the course. Thank you.